Good morning. I want to first say thank you to Karen for preaching last Sunday and giving us the good word that she gave us. She is just one of many incredibly spirit-filled people who could give a word about life from this fellowship. And so I'm grateful to all of you, but grateful to her for yesterday. Last Sunday. And then also, I wanted to let you know that Peg is not here because about 15 months ago, she had a cataract surgery, and since that, on one side of her face, it seemed that the device, no one would admit it though, caused some damage to the trigeminal nerve in her face. And she struggles with that off and on. It has been especially intense over the last 8 days, and we've been able to get to the doctor, and we're experimenting with a couple of different medications. But we wanted to share that with you, one, not because she wants the attention, but for two reasons. One is that if you're going for cataract surgery, check into that, okay? Look into that. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that if you know of anyone that has had trigeminal nerve pain, and you know that there's been some kind of remedy, or you know someone who's been helped, please let me know, because we're always looking for that kind of resource as well. Okay, thank you. The word about life comes from Revelation 21. How many of you really are kind of leery of the book of Revelation? How many of you are leery about it? Okay, all right. How many of you absolutely love the book of Revelation? Okay. Now, Hubert and I are the only ones in the place that love the book of Revelation. And I can guarantee it's for different reasons. Okay? For me, it's a book of hope, promises fulfilled, and for him, it's about those people who need to get theirs are getting theirs. Okay? Amen, he says. All right. All right. So from the book of Revelation, chapter 21, toward the end of the book, and then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And whenever you see a reference to sea, it usually means it's an allusion to chaos. Okay? And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, make note of the direction, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, see. Not just look, but see it. See, the home of God is among all people. God will dwell with them. They will be God's people, and God will be with them. God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away. And the one who was seated on the throne, the Lamb, said, see, I am making all things new. May the Spirit of life and love bless the reading, the hearing, the living of the word about life. Amen. A couple of years ago, when Tim and Linda Schmaltz first came to check us out, yes, the sermon is about Tim and Linda this morning. When they first came to check us out, they brought their Catholic theological sensibilities to their experience here at Shadow Rock. And Tim watched us do our celebrations and at first was a little confounded. After a couple of Sundays, Tim was able to frame celebrations as our unique Shadow Rock sacrament. A sacrament is a visible sign of an invisible grace. In other words, there is more going on among us and between us and within us than meets the eye when we share our celebrations. This odd tradition in our worship service called celebrations is a time when we share different things going on in our lives and in the life of our family. The content of what we share can make us laugh. It can make us cry. And what we share can make us applaud, move us to write thinking of you cards, and can make us pray. We become a sacrament. We don't just do a sacrament. We become a vehicle of grace for each other during this time. And in these moments, church is not where we go. Church is what we create with each other. And so today's word about life offers a vision of a new creation. This small passage has been a formational inspiration for me for a long time. It comes from the book of Revelation, and most people think the book is pretty worthless or incomprehensible, except that it inspires a long list of horror films like Rosemary's Baby and The Omen. And that is quite unfortunate. This book was written as a message of hope to people who were doing their best to survive and thrive in a world of empire. You see, in empire, human life is cheap. And every human being is reduced to a commodity for the sake of perpetuating empire. And more than that, empire has propaganda. And the culture was very clear that there is no better way of life. Don't even try to dream or hope for anything better. And in fact, the rulers of empire demand that there is no other way of life, period. And to resist empire was and is to write your own death sentence. This was the world that the book of Revelation was written. And the message of hope would come in flashes. All through the book, flashes of the image of the throne of God. When some aspect of empire was chewing you up and spitting you out, the writer would give you a picture of the Lamb that sits upon the throne. No matter how ugly, no matter how terrifying, no matter how painful, no matter how powerful, the Lamb that sits on the throne will have the last word. The Lamb upon the throne was an affirmation of the early church that powerless love would triumph over loveless power. And this is the word about life that is relevant for us today. So the image in today's word about life is not one that says your hope is in dying and going to heaven to escape all the terror and the grief. Our hope is in the image of us coming together, not going up. And that somewhere, somehow, God is coming down to where we are and transforming the world into its full potential of love and peace and justice. And while the spirit of life and love is experienced as something external from us, and so it is spoken of as descending, it descends, empowers, and dwells with us, through us. However, the beloved community does not descend down from heaven. Beloved community emerges from the earth. Beloved community emerges from the way we interact with each other. The church is not the place we go, but what we create with each other. We have the power, the responsibility, and the privilege to engineer the new creation right here on earth. Karen said last week that the glue that emotionally and spiritually connects commandment, commission, and commitment so as to create community is trust. And this is so true. But trust in what? Trust in who? She said it last week. She encouraged us to trust in the deep goodness of life, to trust in the work of God in the midst of history, and to trust in each other. Over the next few weeks, I want us to think and pray a lot about what and who we are. I want us to think and pray and discern who our Shadow Rock family is called to be, and what we are emerging to be for a vibrant future. This guiding phrase is within sight and sound. We're familiar with this idea. When we are caring for little ones, we need to be very intentional about keeping them within sight and sound. Most of the time when I'm watching my grandchildren, I have them within sight. And if I don't have them within sight, I better have them within sound. And if too many seconds go by without any sight or sound, then I better go and check it out. A beloved community is a group of people who are intentional about caring for each other, intentional about keeping each other within sight and sound. With my saying this, allow me to confess that sometimes I do a good job keeping all of you within sight and sound, and sometimes I have lost sight and sound of you. I own that. And for hurting you, I'm sorry. When I have lost sight and sound of you, you may have felt like the whole church has forgotten you. And while it feels that way, that is not the truth of it. And it is the responsibility of all of us to keep each other within sight and sound. One of the most critical responsibilities of my work as your shepherd is to empower you to care and love one another. I cannot love and care as your proxy, but I can walk with you to love and care for each other better. And so, you see, the root meaning of the word community comes from the Latin words cum and munus. Cum means with. Munus means duty and obligation. When you put the two words together, you get community, which is a group of people keeping each other within sight and sound with a sense of duty and obligation for each other. And a sense of duty and obligation for the life that we build together. We all crave belonging. We all crave a sense of community. We live with this tension inside of us to be our own person with autonomy and our own identity. And this is in tension with our deep need to belong and to be rooted. We are not meant to be alone. We need both solitude and connection. These are not opposites. Solitude and connection are rhythms of our individual souls and rhythms of the soul of our fellowship. Yes, I contend that Shadow Rock has a soul. The board is preparing for a visioning process, but another way to look at this is the board is discerning the soul of our fellowship. We're working hard to come to clarity about a way to help all of us to define who we are and where we are going. And pieces of the puzzle include our history, our covenant, our theology, the demographics about our surrounding neighborhoods, the cultural shifting tides of religion, people's skepticism of institutions, our Christian tradition, the diverse paradigms of church, even among us, and the church's role in society. We need to hear all these voices and put the pieces of the puzzle together. And in this process, we should never lose sight and sound of one another. After all, Jesus said the only commandment he gives is the commandment to love one another. The enemy of community is consumerism. It is a danger for us to let our anxiety about change and the future to drive our vision. Community is much more than one person entering a space and then another person entering the space and so on. Community is not merely a gathering of individuals coming together. Community is an entity of its own that is more than the sum total of its parts. It points to a greater reality, a greater grace. One of the ideas that helps Peg and I in our marriage is the idea that with us and between us, we have this additional thing that we've created that cannot exist without our individuality, but is more than 1 + 1 = 2. On one level of thinking, we may say 1 + 1 = 2. However, on another level, 1 + 1 can equal 3. For example, one idea plus another idea can equal a third idea. A gestalt, a greater wholeness, comes into being. And for Peg and I, our relationship has its own unique expression and effect on the world. And that new entity needs nurturing. It needs love, and it needs care. And sometimes I forget to make it priority as she calls us back to our covenant to one another. Our relationship needs nurturing and care. And so we care for each other. And we keep each other within sight and sound. But we also care for this thing between us. And this thing that we have created together called a marriage. It is like a garden all of its own that needs watering, weed pulling, and hoeing in order to bear the best fruit. And so it is with you and me. And so we keep each other within sight and sound. And so it is with our beloved community of Shadow Rock. Amen.